Another TikToker trying to make a YouTube debut? Shocker. My name's Aubrei. I'm a book talker. I primarily read literary fiction, horror, thrillers, but I also read sci-fi, romance, everything in between. But my focus is to read books written by diverse authors. I read 10 books this August. Actually had a lot of 5-star reads. I did have 1 2-star. I listened to a lot of audiobooks this month. So I'm excited to chit chat with you guys. I started out the month with a banger, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I'm making my way through Toni Morrison's backlist. First book I ever read by her was Beloved, and then I read Sula and Recitatif, and I read The Bluest Eye this month. Whew, this one was the most emotionally draining for me. I hated it, but I absolutely loved it. This is Toni's first novel. It's set in Ohio, which is where I'm from. It's the story of Pekala, an 11-year-old girl. She's Black. She has gone through so much trauma in her short life. And the one thing that she wishes for is to have blue eyes. Toni Morrison truly has such a way with words that blows me away every time. And I feel like you have to be in the right mental headspace to pick this one up. It's one that I'm so glad I read. I will never forget it. Now, I'm definitely going to want to come back to it. This was an easy 5-star read for me. On a more light note, I also read The Dead Cattail Assassins this month by P. Djeli Clark, and I adored it. It was so much fun. This one is about a group of undead assassins. They have died and been kind of resurrected, but they're still dead by this goddess from the underworld, and they have contracts to kill people as assassins. This was so fun. And there are some high-ish stakes. At no point is it really scary or did I feel like I was getting high blood pressure or anything. I was a little disappointed that the assassins weren't cats, but that's okay. 4 stars. Next, I read The Old Man Who Read Love Stories. It's one of the shorter books I had on my TBR, so I was let me just give it a try. I need the satisfaction of checking a book off of my TBR, and I ended up loving it. This is translated fiction. It's an older book. I think it was first published maybe in the 80s. It's about this man who lives a very peaceful life. He's a widower. He lives in the Ecuadorian jungle, and he loves to read romance stories. That life of his is really upended when an ignorant tourist provokes a wild animal and he has to go into the woods and basically hunt this animal. He's forced into this conflict between man and nature and the environment and culture. It's a quick story, but it really is so rich. It feels very progressive for its time. I got so much more out of this than I was expecting to. And also, look at how gorgeous the chapter pages are. One second. Every page is beautiful like that at the start of each chapter. I definitely recommend this. This is a new favorite classic. Next, I listened to the audiobook of And So I Roar, which is the sequel to The Girl with the Louding Voice. I read it years ago. I did not reread it before going into And So I Roar because I never have any interest in rereading books when I return to their series later on. So I went into it honestly forgetting most things, and the book did a really good job of reminding me of what had happened in the first, so I don't think you need to go back and reread The Girl with the Louding Voice if you don't want to. So I Roar picks up when Tia is going to take Aduni to school. Something drags her back home to her village that threatens everything. This was devastating. After the devastation I experienced reading the first book, I was not expecting to have more in this one. I liked a lot of this, but there's this whole part in the middle, and this is not really a spoiler or anything, where we get the stories of a lot of other girls that are in her village. It just kind of felt like a side quest. All of these other girls' stories were devastating and the character important to what happened in this book. Please check content warnings. The things that you read about in this book are just absolutely horrifying and devastating. The audiobook narrator is Lady Danbury from Bridgerton. I literally thought there were 2 different narrators, but it was the same narrator that did both. She did a great job. I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read Meal, which is a graphic novel. I picked this one up at a library sale and had no clue what it was about. Honestly, I didn't even look at the cover very closely, because if I would have like actually looked at the cover, I think I would have been able to figure out, and I probably wouldn't have bought it. It was about a restaurant that serves insects. And the book takes it like very seriously and talks about how this is something that is done in so many different cultures, should be more normalized. It's fine. I feel just like indifferent about the book. It was fine. 3 stars. I read The Devil Takes You Home. Didn't know what to expect going into this, if it was going to be primarily horror or like if it was just a thriller. I had gotten kind of like mixed reviews, but it's definitely a thriller with horror elements. Kind of reminds me of Harlem Shuffle, Blacktop Wasteland. It has like similar vibes. It's about a father. His young daughter gets diagnosed with cancer and he needs a way to like pay for her treatment. So he reaches back out to somebody that he knew, who he knows deals in like illegal things, and he gets hired as an assassin and he takes the job. And that progresses on to more jobs in the future. I loved the horror elements in this story. The entire time that he was going on these jobs, there was so much darkness looming over him. Him knowing what he was doing was wrong, grief overbearing him the entire time, and then also the horror elements, which I just thought was so well done. And all of those things together just created like such a really moody, thrilling story. If you're looking for a good thriller to read during spooky season, I definitely recommend this one. And I have this author's new book, House of Bone and Rain, that I want to read soon as well. And I read The Seventh Veil of Salome, which is Silvia Moreno Garcia's new book. I'm obsessed with her. Mexican Gothic, I think, will always be my favorite, but The Seventh Veil of Salome is definitely a very close second. It gives the vibes of like Evelyn Hugo, but a million times better. So we follow 3 different main characters. 2 of them are set in like 1950s Hollywood. One of them is a really young and naive Mexican actress who is cast in a very big role called The Seventh Veil of Salome. She's quite the like underdog. She's never had a big role. She was just scouted by like an agent. We also have a POV of an actress who's been in the industry for years trying to get her big break. She really thought that she was going to get the role of Salome and she lost it to this other woman, and she is very upset about it. Then we also follow Salome, who is a figure from biblical times who comes from a wealthy family, and she falls in love with a prophet. This is the story the actresses are cast in as a movie version. So good. All 3 of these women were so well fleshed out, and I just feel like all of their characters weaved together so well, had their own different drives, and there were things that you could see in the 2 women that were wanting to play Salome. You could see some of their attributes as like different sides of the actual Salome that they were inspired by. Actual storyline of like things that happened in those women's lives has quite a few parallels to what actually was happening in Salome's life. Like it was just all woven together so incredibly well. It was dramatic, it was fast paced, it was atmospheric. And then I read For Eids and a Funeral. I had so much fun with this YA romance story. It's about 2 kids who were like best friends growing up, and now they are absolute enemies. They have to kind of like come back together, take care of this cat together. Also, they're both Muslim, and the Islamic center in their town has just burnt down, so they're trying to find a way to get it rebuilt. It was so wholesome. It was cute. It was fun. Then I read Root Work, which is a middle grade story by Eden Royce. I have an entire like list in my phone of horror books written by Black women that I am wanting to prioritize, and this is one of the ones that was in my list. I feel kind of like in the middle about it. It was fine. It's also middle grade. I actually love middle grade stories. As an adult reader, you always have to like take my opinion, I feel like, on middle grade with a grain of salt, because I'm not the intended audience. It's a historical setting. I think it's in like the 1950s, maybe. A set of twins. I think they're like 11. Their grandmother practiced hoodoo and root work, and she passed away. So their uncle is now teaching them to practice root work, be responsible with it, histories behind it. This one was also really wholesome. I got like halfway through and I was like, is this going to be scary at all? And then there kind of were some like scary aspects, which I appreciated. It's not one that I'm like, everyone needs to rush to read, but I had a good time with it. And finally, the last book I read this month was my least favorite of the month. I read The Unmothers. I got the free audiobook from Libro FM. I had no idea what it was about going into it, but it said it was a horror about feminine rage. And like, I see those words, I'm picking it up. I don't care. As I got into it though, I was like, whoa, what an interesting premise. It's about this small town, cult-like, and they have this lore. If you are pregnant, you can pass your pregnancy to a horse. Like everybody in this town has horses. It's like the only thing that people in this town care about is their horses. The idea is that like you can pass your pregnancy onto a horse and the horse will give birth for you. You have to like give it something in return. Sounds kind of sick to me. If you like don't follow through on your end, there is a monster that's gonna like come to collect. Journalist is sent here to investigate this story, and there are human murders that start happening and things like really escalate. Seems like a really cool premise, right? And it was. I'm very tired of the journalist going to a small town to investigate a story main character, because we're always getting so much of the main character who's like not even really involved in this storyline. Yes, it like connects somehow, but like I really wasn't interested in the reporter at all, and she was our main character. I also just feel like it's a lazy way kind of to tell a story, because as the reporter, they're trying to figure things out and we as the reader are trying to figure things out. So like it's kind of easy to merge us together to create that like exposition and storytelling. So that was like my first problem. My second problem is that there is a boy in this story who it's very blatantly said that he forced himself upon a girl and she gets pregnant. And then throughout the rest of the story, he's described as like a good boy who's been in like bad circumstances. It really like rubbed me the wrong way. He was getting so much care and redemption. Women in the story were not getting as much attention at all. So many of the central characters to the story were men. What I did see from the monster and like the lore of this myth or whatever in the town was so interesting, and I just wanted more of that and less of men being angry at each other. Cool idea. Execution wasn't quite there for me. Those are the 10 books I read this August. Please share with me what you have read. Hopefully we'll be back soon.